So I have got this woman on the show that I'm so anxious to talk to because I think we have got some shared values rolling around, like all around. So Nancy Solomon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Yes, this is going to be a blast. You can just feel it. The vibe's good.
So now tell me, I know that right now you take a heavy emphasis on women and helping women grow and their leadership and, just their capabilities to rock the world. I mean, just talk to me a little bit about your why for what you're doing now.
Well, it isn't a pretty story, Candace, but I will share it with you because I have known since I am 11 years old that this is the work I wanted to do. And it's because of my relationship with my father and my mother. And I would hear how my father, God rest his soul, was so disrespectful of who she was as a human being. And I swore to myself that when I got older, I would teach women to never, ever, ever be treated that way. That's how the whole thing started. So it's not a sexy story, but it's a true story.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. And then hey, I think of it this way, right? We have all these different experiences, whether positive or negative, that we can harness to bring to the world in some positive impact in some way. So I love that. So talk to me about, as an entrepreneur, just kind of how did you start this journey and working with women?
It's a pretty circuitous road, as it is for most of entrepreneurs. But I didn't start out that way. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be a psychotherapist. And my parents said, no, daughter of ours will be a shrink. And I think that's because they thought I would figure out just how messed up we were. And so I went on and I followed their path. And so point number one would be, we each have our own unique and divine path. And it's up to us to live that and to find out what that is and to express our values and our gifts and our talents through that purpose, okay? So what I did is I did what any nice Jewish girl from New York did, and she listened to her mom and dad. And I went first as a special ed teacher, and then I went into sales. Now you might be wondering, how did she go from special ed to sales to coaching?
Pretty big.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
More similarity than one would think. And so I went into sales because my whole family was in sales. They were all in retail or wholesale, and it was a natural thing for me to do. So when my friends were flipping burgers at the Golden Arches, I was at Saks Fifth Avenue selling $200 pairs of shoes, right? And I got literally all the way to the top of my field. I was a VP of sales for North America for a European clothing company. 18 years into that journey, I woke up one day and said, how much money will they have to pay me for me to forget how much I hate my life? And God, the universe heard me. And within 4 months, I was unceremoniously fired from that job. And I pulled a do-over card. I moved all the way west, as far from everything I knew as I could get. So from New York to Seattle, coast to coast. I went back to school for my degree in psychology. I became a psychotherapist. That morphed into coaching because coaching wasn't a field yet. It didn't even exist yet. And here we are today. And by the way, I make that like bullet points, but that journey was pretty bumpy.
Oh my gosh. And those are some big jumps. Like special education teacher to sales, right? Sales to psychotherapist to coach. Like, those are major. And so you know what I love? Because I'm a fan of jumping, like in a good way. I'm a fan of finding, right, if something isn't a fit, go and find something else. If that isn't a fit, go and find something else. So you've got this limited time here on the earth, like that moment you came to of like, oh my gosh, how much do they have to pay me to keep hanging around here? Like, man, how many times, Nancy, do you see, in the work that you do every day, women who are in that position of like, I'm just hanging on because this is what I know what to do, maybe?
A lot. If I was guessing percentage-wise, I bet 85% of all women I've ever met or worked with have gone through this crisis, thinking to themselves, wait a minute, whose life am I living? Because it's not mine, right? And what we need to see is that it really, for most people, it isn't their own life, their own design, because you're born and your parents tell you who you should be. And then you go to school and your kindergarten teacher and then tells you who you should be. And then you get a job and they show you who you should be, and then you get a partner of some sort, and then they tell you who you should be. And at some point, usually early to mid 30s, I was a very late bloomer, but early to mid 30s, people wake up and go, wait a minute, I didn't want this for me. Whose idea was this?
Mm-hmm.
And then that's a very hard question to ask yourself, because once you do, you can't take those kind of questions back. It's sort of like you and the question. And so you can either run for cover, looking for safety and security, which doesn't exist anywhere, as we're finding out, or you can sit down and have a serious conversation with yourself, a series of conversations in which you go, okay, if I was scrapping everything, where would I start? Would I live in a house? Would I live in a condominium? Would I live in the country? Would I live in a city? Whatever that is. And you redesign, you literally reinvent yourself.
Mm-hmm. So I love that. And I want to come back to that whole reinventing yourself topic in just a second. Before I go there though, while you did while all this was happening, right? Talk to me a little bit about family life in terms of, were you a mother yet? What did that all look like for you?
Okay, this is a great story, and I got to change something here because we're moving around. I don't know why this is so bad today. Okay. When I moved out here and I went to get my degree, I did that because there literally was no coaching practice anywhere. I was probably one of the first 50 or 100 coaches in the world. And I needed a platform for this. So I get my master's degree in psychology, which most I do. Here I am, I'm 40 years old, and I'm like, I forgot to have children. I've always wanted to have children. And I did not have a partner. And I tried to get pregnant for a year and a half, and that didn't take. And so I went to Cambodia and I brought my baby girl home.
Wow.
She was 6 weeks old. And then 4 years later, I was like, always wanted a second kid. So I stayed local, and I was at my son's birth, and I raised those two children on my own for the last 22 years. Awesome. They're now 18 and 22. And I thought many times, would I do it again this way? And I don't think I would. I think I would have had a much more substantial plan for how I was going to manage my own business and writing a book and mothering two infants. Truth be told.
My goodness. So how did you get through that time? I mean, here you're being like what sounds like Superwoman. I know, trust me, that term. What sounds like Superwoman. How did you get through all of this?
Okay, the big struggle, let me just talk about the big struggle for a minute, was I was unprepared. I was absolutely unprepared for all three of those things. The other thing was I was like wrestling with the beliefs that my parents had given me and that I had embraced. So the beliefs about me was that I did really weird things, like go to Cambodia and bring a baby home in the middle of a war. All right. I didn't think that was so weird. I never aspired to be married. Like I never said, and I literally had the conversation. If you never get married, Nancy, are you good? I'm like, I'm good with that. All right, suppose you're 85 years old, you're laying on your deathbed, and you didn't have any children. And I was like, no, that's not going to happen. Like, that was a must do for me. And so the whole time I was struggling with these parents who really didn't know what to do with this unorthodox kid. You know, they had one daughter who just towed the line. I mean, she just did everything by the books. And then there was me. And they say a different drummer, it really was. And so for me, the hard part has always been the emotional struggle of fighting my upbringing, which was privileged. And I'm aware of that. But that doesn't mean that we don't imbue our kids with garbage that isn't true about them. So instead of saying, you know, Nancy, you're so courageous and you're going out there and changing the world for women, I was like, go get a job. Go get a job like other people, right? And I had been a very, quote, successful VP with a big title and a big salary and everything that goes with that. So all of a sudden to go out on my own was just a no-no in my family. No.
My gosh. So here you are, not only dealing with I've got these little ones and I'm continuing to rear through this entrepreneurial journey, but I'm still continuing to deal with mindset adjustments because of things that have come your way, right? Familial beliefs and things like that. Wow.
And to make it worse, and I use this word very lightly, my daughter's brown. She's dark brown. My son is blonde hair, blue eyed. I'm this, as I said earlier, a New York Jew, and I look that way, right? And so I had to deal with my family. And when I say my family, I mean my mom and dad's discrimination and beliefs about raising a child without a father. And that was very painful.
Oh my goodness.
And continues to be painful until my mom just passed last month. And so that's where it becomes like critical that we know what we're thinking. Does that belong to me? Like, and how am I going to let other people's crap influence and impact me? Right. And that's literally why I moved this far away, because I didn't have to be around it every day. Right. And I have raised, and I will take a lot of credit for this, two of the most delicious human beings who care about the world, who have compassion and empathy, and who are able to talk to me about anything, right? And so for women in general, we're told, just sit down and be quiet. We're still hearing that. Like we like to think that we got much further along than we really are. The fact is that women still do the girl jobs and men still do the boy jobs. I mean, right? And the attitudes are still prevalent, etc. So, you know, I hope this happens soon, because I don't know how many more years I have here. And I want to see women take back the power that they were born with.
Yes, absolutely. You know, when you said that, I feel like I need to go put this in a tweet. Does that belong to me? That is powerful, Nancy. Oh my goodness. Like, to just stop and think, like, with the thoughts that are going through your head, the things that are influencing your actions, like, is this mine or was this given to me? Like that is inspiration to me. So thank you for that. I think.
You're welcome.
Yes, I think that's very important for us to stop and just really evaluate. So now it all makes sense to me, right? Now, just hearing your story and just seeing what I've seen from your work with women, like you really are, you've got these experiences that a lot of other women have seen or touched in different forms. Like you got a lot of them happening. What is what do you say to the woman who feels like, and especially the woman who feels like she's called to do more, like she knows she's called to do more, but just can't seem to step out or just really know what that is and continues to play small? Like, what do you say to her?
Don't shrink to fit. So let me explain. You know, I wrote a book about this very subject, Impact, What Every Woman Needs to Know to Go from Invisible to Invincible. my belief is that within all of us is a level of greatness, and it's unique to us, as I said earlier. The first question I would invite people to ask is, what do I want? And if you're a journaler, whatever you hear inside your head, that voice inside your head, write it down. And then you ask yourself again, but what do I want? And you write that down. And you do that for hours or days or weeks or months. I want to give you an example. As I mentioned, my dad passed 10 years ago, but my mom just passed.
Mm-hmm.
And now my family is like, would you want to move into mom's apartment? She owned an apartment. Do you want to move back to the East Coast? Do you want to live in a house? Like, what do you want to do? And I said to her last night, as a matter of fact, God hasn't told me yet what I should be doing. I have no clue. And if I make a move now, it'll be so everybody celebrates that I'm back east. But I don't know what I want. And I want women to become comfortable with not knowing, because not knowing is a decision too, right? But we want to prove we're smart, and we want to prove we're enough, and we want to prove we're lovable and worthy and deserving. So we look for our antennas, our spidey senses, sort of like, well, what will people love me more for? If I do this or I do that? And I'm literally making my family, unusual, I know, super uncomfortable, because I'm telling them I don't know. I have no inclination at all. I'm still grieving heavily, right? And I'll be darned if I'm going to move anywhere, even to another house from where I am now, so that people will approve of me. But it took this many decades of life to not really give a crap about what people think of me.
And that is a freeing place.
It is.
For sure. And I can't say, and I'm going to be completely honest, I still have my own moments of, oh, okay, so-and-so said that, depending on who so-and-so is. So-and-so said this, but every day I feel myself get closer and closer and closer to, who cares? This is my life to live. You know what I mean? Like, in that,
people are going to judge us anyway. They're going to judge us, and they're going to make us wrong for the things they don't know how to get right. So when I told my parents I was going to open up my business, they were like, "Henny penny, the sky is falling in." They continued to the day they passed to be freaked out that well, it's not safe. And I'm thinking, tell that to the 20 million people that just lost their jobs.
right.
There's no such thing as safe. The only safety we have is our relationship with ourselves, right? And so it is freeing. My son's graduating high school next month. My daughter is in her third year of college. And so I really can do whatever I want. And that can be scary. And I want to say something about entrepreneurs. And I don't think it's men or women. I think it's just entrepreneurs. There isn't a day there isn't a day that goes by of what are you thinking? Like, what made you do this, right? And I've never met an entrepreneur. They could be running a $9 million business, and they're thinking, oh, what was I thinking? And I have to tell you, when my ones were little, and I was struggling with daycare in this big house, I said to myself, my life would be easier if I had a job, because there's a definitive beginning, there's a definitive end. You get your paycheck every other Friday, even if you didn't produce as much as usual. When you're an entrepreneur, it's on you. It is on you. And if you wasted the week, it's going to show up in your bank account.
Yep.
Or not show up in your bank account, right?
Exactly.
So I would say to women who are doubting, you yourself, I don't know how long you've been an entrepreneur. How long, Candace?
So I have been an entrepreneur. Wow. I used to have a business like 6 years ago, but I had a full-time job. I've been at this current venture about a year now, and I just resigned from my corporate job. March 13th was my last day. So it's been a few months full-time entrepreneur.
Good for you. Congratulations. And so my point being is you will have ups and downs, and the ups will be way up and the downs could be way down. And that's why I think your question, to your point of what is your why, you need to hold on to that. And I have it all over my office. I have hearts all over my office. And because in the tough days, you need to remember that this is your calling.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do it here, or you can do it in a regular job. You can do it, but you can't not do it and be happy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. And that's where, you know, that is something you feel like when you're called to do more, you know when you're dissatisfied and you feel every bit of it, no matter what it looks like to the outside. Because I mean, and I've been there, and you would quit what job? You make this much, you would do what? No, 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 no. I'm called to do something more. Like I have to go do that thing. And like I hear you like completely. Oh my gosh. How awesome. See, I told you. Go ahead, Nancy. Go ahead.
I was going to say, when I was in high school, all my girlfriends would come to me and tell me their problems, and I would coach them. We didn't know it was coaching then, right? I mean, it got to the point where it took more energy not to do my calling than it took to do my calling. And I would offer that to your listeners, that when it takes more energy to ignore than it to be this other person, you know, it's please.
Yeah, that it's time. It's time to do it and jump into it. I love it. I love it. See, I told you, Nancy, before we even got started, I'm like, you know what? I just know this is going to be a great conversation. I already know it. Like we are,
Right?
The values are shared. Yes, 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 yes. So let me ask you this one thing before I get into where people can hear more from you. When you think about female entrepreneurship,
Mhm.
and just what you've experienced in working with women in general, what would you say is maybe the one thing that may keep us from truly being as successful as we could be?
Okay, there's the left brain answer and the right brain, and I'd like to offer your listeners both.
Okay.
Women tend to be much more capitalized financially than men.
Hmm.
We can't even go in there, right? I hear from women all the time, I'd love to coach with you, but my husband would never let me spend that money.
Hmm.
You see the expletives over my head in my speech bubble. Like, are you kidding, right? Okay. Because that's still very prevalent in relationships, as much as we'd like to think it isn't, right? So
Mhm.
women have a tendency to set their financial goals too low. You know,
Mm.
people make this big deal of now I'm at six figures. Well, you know, six figures could be $100,000. And in this economy, you're not buying on that. You need to be realistic. You're going to spend more in learning and training and professional
Right.
development in the hard things that you need, you know, computers and microphones or whatever you're going to need, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then the right brain would be, I don't think women trust themselves enough. So it's trust and it's permission and action. So
Mm.
first you have to trust yourself to know that it's your life, and if it ends up a mess, that's on you. And if it ends up a success, on you. And for most of us, we'll go between those two places, those goalposts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it's giving ourselves permission. That's the huge one. That women, you know, and we're taught this culturally. Most of us are anyway. We you know, you're too loud, you're too big, you're too small, you're too pretty, you're not pretty. You know, we have all that garbage that they put on women that are not put on men. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If I get
Mm-hmm.
on a podcast and I'm not wearing makeup, my audience will tell me, why aren't you wearing makeup? They never
Mm.
ask the guys, why are you wearing brown shoes or whatever, right?
Valid.
Right? And so the permission is to be authentically you, and that word is overused. So I'll give you an example. You know the story, the parable of Michelangelo and the David. And he sat down with this massive piece of marble and he developed a relationship with it. He learned where everything was and where the bumps were and whatever. And gradually he began to chip it away at everything that wasn't the David until the David emerged.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I believe, is the invitation of our lifetime, is to
Mm-hmm.
chip away at what doesn't belong to us and give ourselves permission to ask ourselves the really tough questions. The
Mm-hmm.
third is, so the first was trust, and then it was permission, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
action. I don't know about you, but I can talk something to death. I can talk about what I'm going to do one day till the cows come home. and it never gets done. So I've had to discipline myself to take action, and not just to write down the to-do list and put it on my calendar, but actually do it.
Right.
So that
Take
I
some
can
steps.
achieve my goals.
I love
I
that.
find it helpful.
Yes, trust, permission, and action. I love that. I love that. So right now, Nancy, if people who are listening or are watching are like, oh my gosh, I need more of this Nancy lady, where do I find her? How can they connect with you?
Okay. You can go on Amazon and buy the Kindle version of my book, Impact: What Every Woman Needs to Know to Go from Invisible to Invincible. It is like a spiritual business playbook. Okay. So I do the left brain, right brain, tell you what to do, how to do it, and the exercises. My website is theleadershipincubator.com. Now, it's going to look to most of your entrepreneurs like this is a business site. She deals with corporations. I do. But look, and I have a whole section called Women Think. And that's what it's on. It's about women and coaching. And join our mailing list. I'm starting to do a lot of videos on YouTube, and I start my podcast next week. It's called the Brooklyn Playbook: Levity, Life, and Leadership Served Straight Up Brooklyn Style. In other words,
Awesome.
This is no nicey. This is your
I
life.
was gonna say this is gonna have some spiciness to it. I'm gonna have to make sure I get subscribed. Oh, I love it. I am, first off, for those listening and watching, I will make sure that the links to the things that Nancy mentioned do get tagged in the show notes at CandaceSpears.com, so you'll be able to see them there. Nancy, I thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. Oh my gosh, thank you.
Thank you. And you know what I notice about you that it's just so enticing to me is your curiosity. And I think that's one of the greatest traits a person is, being curious about others. I thank the invitation, and I'd love to connect again.
Yes, well, thank you. And thank you for the words. I embrace all of it. So listeners, take everything, and watchers, take everything that you have heard, because Nancy has said some amazing things. So take it and take some action. Don't just hold on to it. And I hope you have a great day, a great evening, whenever you're listening or watching, and I'll talk to you again very, very soon.